So good. One of the cool features is this search. You can search for pretty much whatever you want. If I want to know something about halogens, which are a group of elements that we talk about, it'll search for it. And if I want to know all sorts of great stuff, I can read all of the posts on halogens. I like to highlight this one because student asked what is a relatively simple question and wanted to know how different halogens conjugated with different pi systems interacted with the aromatic ring and how that influenced a certain type of spectroscopy. And instead of getting the really simple answer that they wanted, I had a fun Sunday morning, and so I spent a lot of time answering it and went way more in depth than they wanted and included lots of pretty pictures and just had a really fun time with it. And they got lots of cool information out of it. And I actually had a couple of students comment, wow, that was great. I learned all this neat stuff. And so it gave me an opportunity to go beyond the scope of the course a little bit and provide a little bit more depth. And so I had a fun time with that. And so that was kind of a good time. But if you'll notice, I went around the I can't draw stuff by just saving drawings as picture files and inserting a picture, which is really, really simple. I was just hoping that I could copy and paste or drag and drop, but you know, I got over it and I still have my ChemDraw images and I'm okay. The students had a better solution for this issue, which I'll show you right now. So all of the posts are tagged with numbers, and if a student asks the same question over again, you can just send them to that old post by going at and then that number, and so it works out very nicely. Students, they just take a picture of their work and they use their phone and they upload it and it's smooth and it's no big deal. So I thought this was going to be a deal breaker. They can't draw structures. What are they going to do? That's fine. So I posted this question as sort of a midterm exam review. I didn't get to it in lecture. It was an example in my notes. I thought it was really neat. So I posted the question on here, and student came up with a solution a little while later and answered it anonymously. And then another student asked a follow-up question about, is this the way it reacts? And then, you know, I followed up with some more information, and there was some follow-ups and some sort of back and forth on this. But this was a great interaction between me and the students, you know, outside of class on kind of a flexible time system. So this worked out really nicely. I've actually started using it as a way to make quiz answer keys. I no longer post full answer keys for some of my quizzes and exams, but expect the students to generate them sort of wiki style on this tool, and then I check off that yes, that's the right answer, so they at least know what they are, but this way they're involved in creating that answer key. I also put some review questions up, and here's a great example of I asked a question, student put in a nice detailed answer. It's not entirely right, so I sort of asked for a follow-up, and then TA and student and a couple of students had a good follow-up discussion and eventually got to the right spot. So I think that's mostly what it is, and a pretty good use of it. The only thing that I haven't really solved is I don't know how to get more than 25% of the class heavily involved. Because I've got between a fifth and a quarter of the people who are routinely posting stuff and asking questions. It's a slightly different group than the people who come to my office hours, but not by all that much. There's definitely some people who post on Piazza that either don't feel comfortable coming to my office hours, don't have time, etc. But it still hasn't gotten that student who sits in the back and doesn't really want to learn organic chemistry to start posting for fun. That hasn't happened. But so I'm working on that. Yeah.
So on that, kind of a related question to that, getting more people. So you said you didn't give people any points for posting on here.
No.
So you could, right? You could, and it keeps track of of who's posted and, right? And so as a related question there was earlier, you said they can respond anonymously or they can post a question anonymously. Is that anonymous to the instructor too, or?
Depends on your choice in the setup.
Okay.
I choose to know who's posting.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking, if you told them, I expect you to be involved in Piazza X number of times over the course of whatever you're going to do, you would still know, even if that wouldn't necessarily require removing their anonymity.
No.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. Philosophically, I've chosen not to do that.
Yeah.
But certainly, someone could make a different choice.
Yeah, yeah. What, can I just ask a follow-up of why philosophically? What's your reason?
I want them to have their grades based on demonstrating learning.
Okay.
And so I don't think raising your hand in class is necessarily a demonstration of learning.
Okay.
But I do think it's valuable and important to the learning process. And what I want to do is create tools and resources that are covering everybody's needs to the point where everyone's learning.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily care how they do that. And so if a student doesn't want to use Piazza because they don't think it's their thing, but they like watching my lecture videos, and maybe they're involved in the Peer Learning Association discussions, or maybe they're hiring a tutor, I don't really care. And so I'm a little bit concerned about sort of forcing it artificially. Anyhow, so that's maybe not a perfect answer, but that's what's in my head.
Like I said, it allows flexibility, but how often are you in here checking posts and responding?
I check 2 to 3 times a day. I had a TA, Will Tucker, who was working with me. Rachel knows Will. He was ridiculous in that he had his iPad and his iPhone both set up with the app. So he would get alerts as soon as a student posted a question. That term, our average response time was under an hour. It's now over 3 hours because Will's no longer TAing with me. And so there are sort of predictable things like the night before the exam. I make sure I check kind of regularly because there are going to be a lot of posts, which definitely helps get my time to response way down because there's a whole bunch of responses and I happen to be kind of waiting for it. But generally within about 24 hours, either myself or one of the TAs will respond to the question. Oftentimes, if we answer too quickly, we're going to beat any student response. But when it sort of lingers a little bit, more students tend to respond when they see someone else's question going unanswered.
You can also set up your account to get either a daily email with kind of a summary of the day's activities, or an email every time something's posted.
Which you definitely want to disable.
Right.
But do the
but
students?
the daily one is kind of nice, just to check and see how things are going.
And do you hear from students? Do they do the daily thing so they can just kind of keep up with it, or?
Until I posted how to disable the emails, I got several email complaints, which I guess is kind of defeating the purpose of reducing email. Because they were upset that somehow they were getting all these new emails every time someone posted, and I was like, you can turn that off. And once they found that, I haven't had a complaint since I let them know that 2 semesters ago. So, yeah.
So I'm on faculty in the School of Nursing, and we have hybrid courses that we're now calling blended learning courses. And so we have online discussion. And so we use Learn at UW, the communication tab, and do basically the same thing. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is, what is the advantage to using Piazza versus?
This is maybe a good example, but maybe not. I'm not going to go digging for a great one, but if this isn't, I'll sort of explain what. So there's this bar up at the top that has a little ball at the end, and you can see that there's like tick marks along a gray sort of scrolling thing, and that's the question history. You can actually move back through all of its edits and iterations. And in this case, the first student answer was really, really good. So this isn't the world's best example to show what I'm pointing out. But if the student had somehow answered it badly, and apparently he decided to change activate the ring to activate the ring more efficiently. He edited his own answer. Actually, no, I misspoke. That was a different student who added to that. So it's a Wiki style editing. And then I asked a follow-up. Then there was a little bit of additional editing. So 3 different students all had their fingers in this one. And then we started getting into the follow-ups. So I like the Wiki style editing of the answer until it's really good. And then the instructor endorses it. And it also prevents sort of those long, winding threads that kind of get off topic, that kind of circle back to the front because nobody bothered to read the top, and it's just way smoother. It's just better. Unless, I mean, it is. Like, and the reason, like, you know, Reddit has the up button is so you can get rid of the stuff that isn't important. This sort of does it rather than, you know, oh, this is good, I want to move it up higher in the, you know, list. This sort of does it by focusing individual questions, allowing sort of responses, and, you know, stuff that way.
So I want to give us a chance to play, but as we're doing that, can you say one thing about how the students react to this editing each other's answer? Because it feels like that would be a psychological hurdle that they'd have to overcome.
I think it is, and I'm not sure that they've overcome it.
Okay.
Because some of the students will go ahead and edit it, and I encourage them to do so. And I have multiple places where I've said, this is Wiki style answering, so please edit the question or response until it's right. But there are some who will only post follow-ups because they don't want to touch that pristine bit of work that someone quickly typed out with grammar mistakes and conceptual errors. They're like, oh, I don't want to touch that, so they post a follow-up. But for the most part, I mean, this was, you know, an example right there where 3 people edited it. They understand how Wikipedia works, so they know that people edit it until it's good. So it depends on the user.
Do you see the individual edits that individual people make?
Only if I do that scroll back bit. If I want to, I can, but I don't have to. Which I kind of like the option to see how things have evolved, but I want to know what state it's at kind of right now, which is what it's displaying.
So what about if one student edits and it goes in the wrong direction, and then, you know, you get another student editing the editing part, and isn't that going to be an infinite loop that develops then?
I've never had that happen. Someone actually asked me about that in the chem department, like what happens if the discussion goes off and there's bad information?
Yeah.
You just go in and say, that's wrong, this is right, and it ends it. And I have had wrong stuff posted once or twice, and I did have, right before this last exam, 2 really high achieving students just completely wrong in their answer, but it sounded really convincing. And then a 3rd student came in and said, no, I think it's this, and I just clicked endorse, and that was the end of it. So I've heard that question and that fear a little bit, but I haven't experienced it, so I don't really know.
Well, the problem I can see is that if, let's say, if 5 students collaborate on one answer, you know, and there's a number of good things in there, but there's also a number of bad things in there, you know, how do you deal with that?
You just use your instructor's response to go, yeah, this part's right, but this part is wrong, fix that. And I've made those comments, and then they fix it, because they want the right answer. I mean, they want to know what's correct. So, yeah.
You can embed images. Can you embed audio and video?
You can embed a link to anything.
A link to which you can't embed it.
It doesn't work super well with Kaltura. You can't embed that and get it to play. I don't know all the things you can. I know.
And YouTube.
YouTube, you can embed. Great.
Have you had any problems with students? How does it handle co-editing that happens at the same time?
Oh, I really screwed up one of my TAs who spent a good half hour editing something, and then it warns you someone else is editing this. Do you want to add to it or delete your edits? He chose delete, which was funny. I don't know why he clicked that, and then was sad because I spent like 30 seconds on a really quick response. So,
because looking at your graphs, there will be times when there will be multiple people.
It alerts you.
I'm hitting it at the same time.
It alerts you, and as long as you can read and choose the correct click, you're fine. Ben didn't. He was sad.